Hey guys, how is everybody today? This is Sunday. It's a very pretty day today. It's one of those days that's going to start out kind of cool and it's going to warm up the entire day and then it's going to get stormy tomorrow. But anyway, I've just been out. I ran a couple errands and cleaned the inside of my car out. I'm not doing the outside yet because, like I said, it's going to rain, so no point in that yet. But I did that. So now, as I promised earlier, those of you who follow my community posts, which are not very often that I do those, but I mentioned that I was going to do a video about Chrysler alternators, so that's what this is. We're going to talk about these old Chrysler built alternators, specifically from the one from about 1960 up through the mid 80s. And I was requested to talk about some other varieties like the 100 amp and some other kinds of later alternators, but I don't believe I'm going to at this point because I never deal with those and I don't know much about them and I don't see them very often. So we're not going to cover those on this video. We're just going to kind of keep it simple. We're just going to cover the older alternators that everybody knows and sort of loves. So I have three different cars. I have this 66 Chrysler, full-size Chrysler 300 with a 383 and air conditioning. And then I have, back peeking around back behind over there, I have a 69 Dodge Dart with a 273 V8 with air conditioning. And then I have a 1968 Plymouth Valiant with a slant six and no air conditioning in the garage in there. It's undergoing some reconstruction right now. So I have three different Mopars, which take three different alternators, and none of them have the correct alternator on them. So I'm going to take this opportunity to hopefully educate you about how to identify them, and sorry for the wind noise, how to identify them, and hopefully also to tell if one is an original or not original, has been rebuilt or not, and things like that. I've delved into this very deeply. I've spent a lot of time looking at alternators and part numbers and parts books and things like that. So I'm pretty well versed in them by now. So I know a lot of people are not. These things. Would you like me to take that down? Okay, I put the wind chime on pause temporarily. I know that gets on people's nerves sometimes. That actually gets on my nerves sometimes when it's really windy. So anyway, these alternators, you know, it's hard to tell them apart. It's hard to know what goes where and all that. So let's look at these and show you what we got. First off is this 66, and it's got, well, what it's supposed to have. This car, according to the parts book, is supposed to have a 46 amp alternator, and it does not. So let me just kind of start by saying that a simple way to know what your car, before you look in parts books, what your car should have is how it's equipped. Like a car like that slant six in there, there's no air conditioning, it's just a base car with no power accessories. Normally those always got a 37 amp alternator. Sometimes they're called 30 amp, but most of the time they're just labeled as 37 amp alternators. And any V8 that did not have air conditioning, and then maybe a high performance V8 like a Hemi that would never have air conditioning, also got a 37 amp alternator. And the 37 amp alternators normally always got a single groove pulley. Now when you started stepping up to cars that had air conditioning, then they would normally always come standard with about a 46 amp alternator. That's, like I said, that's what this car is supposed to have on it. That's what that Dart over there has on it, supposed to have. But the Valiant does not, because the Valiant does not have air conditioning. Now there's also a 60 amp alternator that's a Chrysler built version like this. I've never seen one in person, but they do exist. If I ever find one, I'll grab it if it's not been rebuilt. But the theory and the thing to keep in mind about these is that if you had a car that would normally just come with a 37 amp alternator, no air conditioning, back when you bought the car or you ordered the car, you or the dealer could choose to upgrade the charging system. That was one of those things that was like a selling point back then. So you could have a non-air conditioning car that came equipped with an optional 46 amp alternator. Or you could have an air conditioning car, which would normally come with a 46 amp alternator. You could have it optioned with a 60 amp alternator. They labeled them like towing package and things like that. And then stuff like police cars and cabs and heavy demand usage like that. There was a company called Lease Neville that made alternators, but they were not Chrysler built alternators. These are Chrysler built alternators. Lease Neville built alternators that were optional or standard actually on those cars. So you don't often see those, and we're not going to talk about them. So that's your basics. You can go in the Chrysler parts book. They're still posted online. I think mymopar.com has those. And you can go, I've went through 64, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And it tells you, in other words, it tells you what alternator it should have, what part number alternator it should have, what pulley it should have, dual, single, what size pulley, all that stuff. And I'll warn you now that there's going to be some oddballs out there that are actually were produced, but they don't have the number that corresponds to the parts book. I've seen some of those floating around, and that's some of those maybe be over-the-counter replacements or stuff like that. So you will see those, so don't flip out about it if you do, and say, you didn't cover this. Well, it's because you just don't really ever see them very often, but they are there. Okay, so we talked about that, and let's talk about the two kinds of alternators that you'll normally find on these cars. This car has what's called a round back alternator, and it's very easy to tell this one because it's rounded, and originally it has one connection for this is the charge wire, and then it has one field connection down here, and that's how the car is wired. Now, the later style is one of these. This is a square back alternator, and you can tell the big difference in them. And not only is the difference in the casting back here obvious, but this one, now let me tell you, this alternator is a hybrid that somebody has rebuilt. Some companies rebuilt to operate on one of these older cars. But normally it has a charge wire, and then it has two field connections down here. That's this. Get the light there. That's a field connection there. You have one green one and one blue one on a later car, like 72 up. This car doesn't have that, and never did, because it's the old style charging system, and so it's not wired for that. And people ask, they say, well, how can I use one of these later model alternators on the early car? Well, you do what these folks did. That will normally be, that would normally be the other field connection. You see it says FLD. I can't get this light to behave for me here. Come on, boy. There we go. FLD right there. Every time it says FLD, that means field, but that's not a connection anymore. What they've done, that's a special connector they've bolted on right there, and it grounds that to the case of the alternator on this square back alternator. So if you want to use one of these, you have to ground one of the field terminals to use it. You have to do that. It doesn't matter which one, doesn't matter if it's blue or green. You can hook the blue wire where the green was and hook the green where the blue. It does not matter. Just it don't care. But that's how you make it work. And allegedly, these alternators are a little bit more heavy duty as far as reliability, and they're easier to service because they don't have all the soldered connections in the back of them like the early ones do. But in my experience, none of them have worked very well, especially after they've been rebuilt. And all the ones I have been rebuilt. So let's go talk about that. Rebuilds. Okay, these rebuilt reman alternators. And this is why I do not like these. This is what I had to use. I've been tracking down the right alternators for these cars that I have here. And I've scored one so far. It's on the way. It's a original 65 alternator. But I'm going to show you how you tell if it's been rebuilt and how you do that, and then why you don't want to fool one of these things. So this is the one that's on the car, and the first thing on these older pre-square back alternators you need to remember is that they have a part number stamped into them. So I've got another one here, my spare alternator. We're going to use it for an example. If you look on the back of it and come to about right here, there's a big pad right here. All right, you look on this one, and this one is stamped That number is 2098850, and then there's a 4-63 below it. That 2098850, that's the part number. That corresponds to a 46 amp alternator built the 4th week of 1963. So that's how you tell what it is. And so that's a quick identification of one of these things. Normally, on later, past about 1964, there would be a starburst here. And this one does not have that. It never did. It just has the Plymouth forward look symbol, but you would see a starburst and it would have 63 in there. All right, now here's another look at this one. See, this one's got a field terminal, and then over here, it has nothing. There's no field terminal on this one. It's a little bit different from that square back, quite obviously. So I was looking at this alternator and I thought, well, this has not been rebuilt. It looks pretty nice. It's a little grubby, but it's all original. Hey, that's good. And then I got looking at it up here, and this is hard to see. I apologize for that, but there's the starburst. So there's what's left of the starburst. It's kind of, see if this camera will focus in on it. There's the remains of the starburst, and I see a 7 on the front of that. So this alternator's been apart, and that's not at all unusual. That's the majority of them have, and that's why I'll tell you why that is. Don't fall. Is because that the fronts and the backs of these things are interchangeable. You can take a early front and put on put a late back on the back of it. You can take the front end off of a round back and put it on a square back rear end, vice versa. You mix them all up. So when some unknowing person pulls off the original Chrysler alternator off their car like they did this one, and so I gotta have a new alternator, I guess I'll go get a rebuilt one up here at AutoZone or someplace, and they carry that good original alternator in there that's all matched up, has all the original stuff on it, all the original pulley, and they give it to the goon behind the counter and get their new reman alternator and leave and go home with it. What happens to this one is when it makes its way back to the reman facility, somewhere probably overseas or in Mexico or someplace, then first thing they do is they yank this pulley off and throw it away, because it's probably, they assume it to be worn out. And then they take the fronts off and they throw it all in one pile. They take the back off, throw them all in one pile, and they're gone for good. They're never matched with each other again. So this one's mismatched. Somebody's rebuilt it. I don't think this one went through a major rebuilder because the stampings look good on it. It's all got nice and sharp. So I'm going to show you how you tell if one's been rebuilt. Besides that, date on it. So I was looking at this one. This one is obviously a reman. And it looks nice. You know, this is what everybody loves to see. Oh, it's a nice, clean alternator. I can see all the stuff in it. It's real clean. It's got to be good, right? So I was looking at this. You can hardly make this out. You see how this finish is all kind of rough? It's been blasted with something, media blasted somehow. So it's all the numbers on here are just about obliterated. But I can see enough of this one to see that it has a 537 on the end of the part number. And a 537 on these alternators is always a 37 amp alternator. 35, 37, whatever. They call it a 37. But that's 537, that number. That's always corresponds to the low output alternator. Now I just told you that those never come with air conditioning and they never come with a dual pulley. So how did this get one? Well, this is a new pulley on here. I can tell that because I look at it and see how it's flap on the front. It's supposed to have, if it was supposed to have a dual pulley, it would look like this one. It does not. But that alternator is, somebody's put this thing together from who knows what's made it up. It's got a front from somewhere and it's got a back from somewhere. Who knows what it is now. It's got the wrong pulley on it. Not only that, look at this. Look at these belts on here. These are the right belts for this car, but you see how far up the belts sit in the groove, out of the groove of the pulley? That's not supposed to happen. It's not right. So I was looking at that trying to figure, well, why in the world is that going on like that? And I was doing some measuring and it turned out the groove, the width of the groove is okay in the pulley there, but the depth is off. It narrows significantly right away, so it makes the foot of the belt here stick up out of the pulley. So this pulley is no good. It's not, I mean, it'll work, but it's not appropriate. So the one I've got coming for this is the right one. It's a 850 part number alternator. That's the last three, like that one is. It's basically that alternator, but it's got a 65. It's got a late 65 rear, late 65 front end. All that matches. So that's how you tell. If you find one like that one I just showed you that's got, like, one of them says 66 and one of them says, the date on it says 78, you know it's been rebuilt. You know it's been apart. It's no good. I mean, it will work. When I say no good, I mean if you want an original alternator that has all its original parts, that's not it. So somehow or another, who knows what it's putting out now. It was rated at 37 amp, but that's totally the wrong alternator for this car. It's not even supposed to be on here. It looks like it, but it's not the right alternator. So let's go look at the other one over here. Let me get my light, please. So this is a 69 Dart, and I knew right away it didn't have the original alternator on it, and that's pretty common. You know, they do wear out and fail. But this is the same exact kind of alternator we were just looking at over there. But the problem with this one is it's also remanned, because I was looking here and the numbers are almost impossible to see on it, but it's an 850 part number alternator, which is right for this. This is supposed to have a 46 amp alternator, but the date codes do not match between the front and rear housings, and that's the wrong pulley on it. I see that all the time. People put a dual pulley alternator on an application that's supposed to have a single groove alternator, and most of the time it gets the belt out of alignment, and I can see that this one's slightly out of alignment. It's going too far back. You know, wear your belt out pretty quick. So it's supposed to have, this one's supposed to have, since it has air conditioning, it's supposed to have a 46 amp alternator with a single 2.5 inch pulley that is a dual 2.5 inch pulley. So it's the wrong alternator also. Somebody put the wrong one on it. So, you know, it works, but it's no good for me if I want the right one for it. So when I take this engine out, I'll fix that. I've been looking for that anyway. So, all right, let's look at the last one. Got two down. Both of them are wrong ones. Both of them are Bozo Mutt hybrid alternators that are made out of different things. So, you know, we looked at this one just now. Now, like I said, this car, I think this alternator came off that burned up convertible I had. And it works. It's quiet, it charges, and you know, for most people, that's going to be just fine. But the point of this video is, if you want to know how to tell what you're looking at and what you have in front of you, this will help you know that. So this alternator is, I don't know what it is. I don't know how many amps it is, because they don't stamp any of that information in these later ones. The later ones had a tag under one of the pulleys. I'm sorry, one of the housing bolts, and that's long gone. So we don't know what that is. Now, you may look at this and say, well, it's got a single pulley. That's got to be right. Well, here again, this is another one of these new pulleys. See that? And again, the belt is sticking up out of the pulley too far because it's made incorrectly. So this car, I'm going to test you on this. Which one is this supposed to have, since it has no air conditioning and no accessories? It is supposed to have a single groove 37 amp alternator. That's what it's supposed to have. So I don't, like I said, there's no telling what these put out. And the thing about alternators people sort of misunderstand is, you know, they think that if you have a 37 amp alternator, it's going to put out 37 amps all the time. I'm sorry about that door. Something's wrong with it. But maybe it needs some WD-40 on it. Or they think if you got a 46 amp, that's what it puts out all the time. Or if it's got a 60 amp, that's what it puts out all the time. It's not the case. It means the alternator is capable of putting out 37 amps if it gets that much drawn out of it. It's capable of putting out 46 amps if it gets that much drawn. But there's no real point in putting on a car like this trying to go get a 100 amp damn alternator for it. It's just a waste of time and money. So this one doesn't have the right one either, and I checked the date codes on the stampings. It's like I said, it's been rebuilt because everything's all grainy and you can't hardly make anything out. But it's got that number right down here on the front of it that's a 499 or 409 something, and that's way late. That will never be on this car ever. I saw one back here. Yeah, there's one right back there. See that one in that starburst? That says 83. So this is the back of this alternator is an 83. Yep. So anyway, it's supposed to have a 537 alternator on it. You know, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to use these alternators, not the one on that gold car, because I'm going to take all that apart. But I'm going to use these alternators till I find the right ones for it. I'm not going to stress out over it. But, you know, this just goes to show you how you know, a lot of these alternators are not anything like what they're supposed to be, and they're not what they started out as. So they're just some generic something that somebody's put together in a factory somewhere. So please don't, you know, if you've got an old Mopar and you've established that it's probably the original alternator, and how would you do that? Let's say if you had a 68 Roadrunner that was built, you knew from the fender tag it was built in November of 1967, then your alternator, you would look on the parts book and you say, okay, that car does not have air conditioning, so it's probably got to have a single groove 37 amp alternator, which is number 537. So you look at your alternator and you find that stamping that I told you about on that other one over there. I showed you that. You say it says 537 on it, so that's right. And then you look, it says the date on those is the week, then a dash, then the year. So if I had a car like this one, this car was built in November of 67. So the original alternator for this car would have been built about a week to a month before the car was built, because they used alternators and starters up quickly. You know, they didn't build them and let them sit around very long. So I would be looking for an alternator that said, you know, you can get a list of the week numbers on the internet, but you'd say probably week, I don't know, somewhere around week 40-67. You know, you would want it somewhere dated in like late October, early November. You'd want it before the build date of the car. You wouldn't want it after. If you have a 68, you don't want an alternator that says 68 and 68 on it, because that's too late, according to when the build date is. So you have to think about that. If it was built, in other words, I didn't say that very well. If it was built in calendar year 67, then it would have to have a 67 alternator dated 67 on it. It cannot have a 68 on it. That'd be incorrect. Now you can do that. It's your car, but to be correct, you know, if you're like me and you're just obsessed with this stuff, then you know you have to put it back. You have to find a October, November alternator for it. That's originally what it had on it. So anyway, but like I said, if you have one of these old cars and you think it's the original alternator and it's acting up, please don't turn it into a rebuilder. Don't take it to the parts store and get rid of it. That's the worst thing you can do. You see, I just about can't watch some of these videos that people make about getting an old car going anymore, because you know, I know they mean well, but they'll take something original off. They'll say, oh, that alternator's not charging, or that starter doesn't sound good. That starter, you know, I watch these videos about people trying to get an old Mopar started, and you know, they're out there starting it. It's probably got maybe the original start, and it's, you know, and you know, the engine hasn't run for 30 years, and it probably doesn't have enough compression and can't get any fuel. You know, all these other variables. But the first thing these guys say, they say, oh, that starter's turning over too slow. We better go get another one. You know, so I can't hardly watch stuff like that, because I know better. These things will start, if the engine's in good shape to begin with, these things will start all the time. They always start, any kind of weather. So I know this has been kind of a lot of talking, and kind of been a a lot of stuff thrown at you, but maybe this will give you some guidance on these alternators and starters. You know, check and see if you have the original stuff. And if you have the original stuff, it looks like it is, keep it, man. Go either learn to rebuild them yourself, or if something goes wrong with it, take it down, find a guy that does alternators and starters and rebuilds those, and have him go through it for you. And you tell him, say, do not separate the halves of my alternator under any circumstance. When I get this alternator back, it needs to be the same two pieces I brought you. Don't get rid of my pulley. Don't get rid of anything. You know, you have to be direct with people about stuff like that, because this day and age, people have made a profession of not listening. So, okay, guys. Well, I'm gonna hang it up. I've got work to do in here and outside. So, busy weekend. So, feel free to ask any questions. And again, not getting into the later stuff because I'm not familiar with it. I don't deal with it. I don't deal with the Denso alternators or the 100 amp, stuff either. I just don't. I wish I had something to tell you about that. I just don't. But and anyway, a lot of people watching this have probably got cars that are as old as this one, so they just want to know about these alternators. And the last part of this video is going to be, I'm going to show you an example of the parts book. And this is what I'm going to show you here in just a second is the original Chrysler parts book. You go through these things, and that tells you every last part number that's supposed to be on one of these cars, or that car out there, or that car out there, for every year. And there were addendums to them, and they had, it'll say starting January 1968, they changed the temperature gauge, or they might change a distributor part number, or they changed, so I think that stuff is fascinating. I can spend hours sitting there looking at numbers and chasing parts, and that's just what I do in the evenings when it's cold and I don't feel like working out here. I just sit there and chase parts, just on and on and on. But I know some of you are not going to really care about that. You just say, well, I just want an alternator works, and that's fine. If you're happy, I'm happy, and everybody else is happy. But if you're really into this stuff and you really want to know what you have and if it's right or wrong, then I've given you the basics of how to find out. So stay tuned here. Just in a second, I'm going to show you these part number books. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the passenger car parts catalog. This is directly from Chrysler. It says right up here in the corner, Chrysler Parts. Covers Plymouth, Valiant, Barracuda, Belvedere, Satellite, Fury, Dodge Dart, Coronet, Charger, Polara, Monaco, Chrysler Newport 300, New Yorker, and Imperial, which is not called Chrysler Imperial. No matter how many times these folks say that, it's not called that. This would be an Imperial Crown or a LeBaron, and so that's the models covered in this. And this is dated March 1969. Parts Division, Detroit, Michigan, supersedes this part number version supersedes the last one. So I picked this because this kind of falls between the cars that I have. I have a 66, a 68, and a 69, so it's going to be generally close to what we have. And this thing goes through all kinds of stuff here. Tells your VIN, how to code VINs, all that. This is located on mymopar.com, by the way. So it's got a bunch of stuff here. I'm going to kind of speed this up, get on through it, but it's got different sections. This first it's got packages, it's got option packages that you can buy, I guess, or things that made up the things. It's got brakes, it's got belts, cooling, stuff like that. Fan assembly, radiators, side marking. Number 8, section 8 is the electricals. That's what we're concerned with. So I've got to get us to alternators, which is right after distributors. So we're in distributor component parts. So every part that makes up a distributor, and the distributor numbers are right there. So if you're ever curious about that, you can find out all that stuff. So let's run on down here. There we go, alternators. For component parts of alternators, see part type code 8-29-0, where component parts of a listed alternator not shown ordered by description. Production assemblies without pulley are for identification purposes only. That's important. Or to service alternators with pulley. So in other words, they have, down here you'll see they have a number for an alternator without a pulley, the number of the pulley, the grooves of the alternator, pulley, and amperage, and the part number for the alternator with a pulley. Okay, note, higher ampere least level alternators and alternator regulators are used on some 1968 vehicles. Chrysler parts do not stock complete replacement assemblies or repair parts for least level units. When complete alternator or alternator regulator assemblies or repair parts are required, they should be ordered by description direct from the nearest least level distributor or least level at 1374 East 51st Street, Cleveland, Ohio. Write that address down. Attaching parts such as brackets, straps, and belts are available through your usual Chrysler parts source. Note, alternator with double groove pulley may be used for single groove pulley application. Instruction sheet included in the package. Well, that goes against what I said. You know, they say you can do it, but I've seen cases that it didn't work right. The belt was misaligned, so maybe there was a specific way you had to put them on. I don't know, but Chrysler says you can do it. So if you're okay with having an extra groove there unused, then I guess go for it. So if we look here, this is our application. 6-cylinder V, which is like a Valiant, B or L, which is a Dart. Valiant B body is like a Coronet or something like that, the mid-size one. L is a Dart without air conditioning with 2.5-inch single groove pulley. That's your alternator without the pulley. That's your pulley number. We saw that. Well, I hadn't shown you one yet, but I've got one to show you here actually in a minute. But that's a single groove alternator pulley, 37 amp. That's the number that should be stamped on the alternator, 2642537, which incidentally is also used on a Hemi. Then you have a 6-cylinder V, B, or L with a 225 engine with air conditioning. R, that's car model, R, W, or P with a 2.5-inch single groove pulley. That's what my Dart's supposed to have. You look here, there's a different number there on the without the pulley, but the pulley number is the same, single groove, amp's the same, 2642537. So that's interesting that a 6-cylinder with air conditioning still got a 37 amp alternator. Okay, then you have 6-cylinder VBL. That's your car lines. VBL RWP with 2.5-inch single groove pulley. It's another part number for the one without the pulley, but we don't really care about those. Same pulley number, same groove, but this is a 46 amp alternator. There's the part number, 2098850. So the part number has changed, even though it's still a single groove pulley. This was the optional higher amp alternator for those cars. Okay, then you have a 6-cylinder VBLRWP with 2.5-inch single groove pulley. Same pulley, 60 amp, which I've never seen one of those ever, but I guess they did exist. And then you had a 8-cylinder VBLRWPDCY. That's every one they made just about, with a 2.5-inch single groove pulley. That's the exact same pulley number for all of them. Single 37 amp alternator. That's the number 537 alternator again. Well, those pulleys were used on a lot of stuff, weren't they? Then you got 8-cylinder VBL, which is those like this up here, but this one is VBL with 273 engine with air conditioning, except 3-speed transmission with 2.5-inch single groove pulley. That's what my Dart is supposed to have. That's what it is. So it's supposed to have that same single groove pulley, 2.5-inch pulley, 46 amp alternator. There's that number again, 850. Then you have an 8-cylinder VBL, same cars with a 318 and a 340 engine. R chassis with 318, 383, and 440 engine. W chassis with 318, 383, and 440 engine. PDC, by the way, C is like a Newport or a 300 like my car, with air conditioning with 3-inch double groove pulley. So do you see that split there? These up here got the 2.5-inch single. All these cars had a 3-inch double groove pulley. There's a different pulley number, 2095059, double groove pulley, 46 amp alternator, but it's the same alternator part number stamped on it. And then down here you have 8-cylinder VBL except 273 engine RW PDC with 2.5-inch single groove pulley, 46 amp alternator, number 850. You have VBLRW except charger with 2.5-inch single groove pulley. There's that same single groove pulley number again. That's the 60 amp alternator. That's an 010 alternator. Then see, you go on down through here. It's a 3-inch double groove. Then you got a PDY with trailer tow package, 2.5-inch single groove. So essentially, you only had one single groove pulley. You know, if you had a single groove pulley on any of them, you had a 478 pulley. For most of them, if you had a double groove pulley, you had a 2095059. And then there's a one, here's a weird one. Look at this. 8-cylinder Y with air conditioning with 2 3/4-inch double groove pulley. That's a totally different part number for the pulley stamped on the outside of it. Double groove with a 60 amp alternator. So you have 3 different pulleys in double or single for some of them, and you had 3 different alternators. You had a 37 amp which ended in 37 number. You had a 46 amp that ended in 850. You had a 60 amp that ended in 010. So you had 3 alternators. You only had 3 different alternators on all these cars, but they were different with the whether it had a single or a double, like I said before, and the diameter of the pulley. So it's really confusing. That's why this is a very good resource to come back to. Now you're going to notice on there, somebody's going to say, well, I don't see anything about a Hemi. Well, the Hemi was a special car and a special engine, so there may have been an addendum to this concerning them. But okay, guys, well, I got one other thing to show you. I got my alternator in that's going to go on my Chrysler, so I want to go out there and show you that. So let's do that now. Okay then, so last thing is I thought we would look at this alternator that I bought for my Chrysler. And so I was waiting on this thing. I decided to delay publishing this video until this thing got here, because it's really an interesting thing to see and look at as far as what we've been talking about. So again, this is just a very common, normal looking alternator. There's nothing really special about it. It's not a special alternator. It's missing the pulley. There's a pulley there, but that's not the one that goes to it. It's the one that came with it. At least I don't think it's the one that came with it originally. But I think what happened was this originally had a double pulley on it, and somebody wanted the double pulley off of it because they think that it's valuable, which it is not, but they think it is. So they pulled that pulley off of it and just had this one from some reman, I guess, and just threw it in there. This pulley is as we were talking about the pulleys, this is actually a Chrysler pulley that's been blasted, I guess. Has a gray finish on it, but there's the number, 2444478, and that's a 2.5-inch single pulley, which normally would come on. I think the break is on those the small blocks, like a 273 and a Site 6, 273, 318s and stuff like that. I guess normally got these smaller pulleys, and then as you saw on the parts list there, and then stuff that got big blocks in it had the bigger pulleys. I mean, maybe I'm thinking that it's more along the lines of that it's the pulley ratio. So the crank pulleys on like those small blocks are probably a little bit smaller, so they could use a smaller alternator pulley in turn, and then the pulley on the big block is larger, so they used a larger pulley. That's just an idea. But so anyway, what's the deal about this alternator? This is a round back alternator. As you see, it's round right there where it counts, round where it counts. Sounds like that'd be a good movie title. But I was looking for the right 65 date code alternator, and I've been looking and looking and looking. So this is what I came up with. This is, if you look at this, here is the part number for it. It's supposed to be 2098850, and it's got a build date of 32nd week of 65. That does actually say 65 on there, so that's somewhere in August of 65. So it's a little bit early for a car built in late November, early December, but it's close enough for my use. And the main thing is that not only is it authentic because the union worker up there was hung over or something and ran his lettering set off the side of the pad, but if you look at the back of it, we need to see if our dates match. So that's a 65, supposed to be a built-in 65 alternator, so these things have to say 65, both halves of them. So if we look here, I have it upside down obviously, but if we look at this starburst on the back half of it, sun wheel, whatever you want to call this thing, if this thing will focus on that, come on. This camera's not. Alright, you see that says 65 in there, and then it has all those little dots. There's 12 pie sections there, so they're sloppy, but there's only going to be 4. There's only 4 weeks in each month, so one of them is filled up, so it's supposed to be 4 dots, and then it's got 2 dots on the second side, the second one over right there. That makes it a little bit more clear. So you got 4 into January and 2 weeks into February of 65, and so we want our other one to be close to that. You can't say something like 67 or 73 or 61 or anything like that. So let's see what it says. Upside down again, I'll be damned. So this one also says 65, and you know, these things, like I said, the workers up there, they weren't the most neat people, obviously, but this one is more or less got the first month filled up. One of them's off on the other one, but then it has 1 dot in the second month. So that would be one side of that's the casting date for this housing half. So that's going to be, this one was cast the first week of February, and this one back here was cast the second week of February. I know it's all sloppy. So that makes it a matching pair in my eyes, as close as I'll ever come, and I can tell it's not been bead blasted or run through a rebuilder because it's got the nice crisp definition on the casting features and stuff. So, and again, that's your part number for the casting. That's not the alternator part number. So now you may think, well, this thing sure has the housings were cast a lot earlier than the alternator was assembled, and that's true. You got to remember though that how many cars they were building, trucks they were building back then. So they probably cast up a whole ton of alternator halves, you know, and kept them stored or, you know, built up in advance, I guess, whatever you want to say, however you would put that. But so, you know, when it got ready to build, they needed a 46 amp alternator, which is what this is. Then about sometime in August, they got, you know, they probably had these things wired together. You know, when they cast them, they probably cast them, wired them together, or maybe somehow wrapped them or something. Anyway, they kept them matched. That's because they're always supposed to be matched. So they grabbed them, and the guy that builds alternators built an alternator, and then he stamped it, you know, of course, with his kind of not very neat stamping here. But, you know, you got to remember that these guys probably stand here building alternators day after day after day, alternator after alternator after alternator, 37 amp, 46 amp, 60 amp, back to 37, back to a 60, you know, on and on and on, day after day. The more alternators he built, the more alternators they wanted. You know, just drudgery, that drone day after day, nonstop alternators. He probably dreamed about alternators. So when he got to this one, he just, you know, I can't take it anymore. Right in the bag. But get it out of here. So Anyway, I'm going to have to come up with the right pulley for this. This alternator down here that I was showing you earlier, it has the correct size pulley, but it's not the correct one because they don't stick out like that one does there. The early ones don't do that. They do a little bit, but not quite like that. So that's about it, guys. I mean, that's really the gist of it. You simply have, for any car series that Chrysler built, they had a particular alternator for it and a particular pulley for it. So don't just, if you care about things like this, I know there's people that don't, but if you care about things like this, then don't just slap an alternator on there and say, well, I got an alternator on it. If depending on what kind of car or truck you had, it was supposed to have a certain alternator. 37 amp or a 46 amp or a 60. Like I said, I've never seen a 60 amp alternator, one of these like that. The early ones I'm talking about. And I was looking back through the parts books, the online parts books, and this stuff with a 60 amp and all that started about 65 or 66, I think, because the early parts books don't show anything more than a 46 amp alternator in a civilian car. Now I know the least level, they were high amp alternators, but that's police and severe duty stuff. I'm talking about just in your everyday car. So, and I know on back there in the early 60s, the numbers were a little bit different. I think they had one of them was a 830 was the end of the part number, and then might have been another number in there, 835 or something like that. So it can be confusing to you, but just look through the parts books and get an idea about what you need, and that should help you in the right direction with these alternators. And again, if you have an original one, if you check these dates and you think you've got a unit that's all together, it's all original, and the numbers matches what should be on your car, man, by all means, do not send that thing don't take it to AutoZone or O'Reilly's or someplace like that and turn it in for a remanufactured one. People got seduced by these remanufactured alternators because, like I said earlier in the video, all you gotta do is just spend the time taking the old one off and putting another one on, and you're happy, But in the end, you really got an alternator that's probably not going to last near as long as the original did. You got 40 years out of the original, and you may get 2 years out of the reman. So it's your choice. So anyway, I'm going to go through this one as I have time to. That'll be later on. The one on the car is working okay right now, so no rush on it. But I wanted to show you one other thing too. I know y'all been asking or wondering at least about this car, how I'm coming on this project. It's come pretty slow. It's slower than I thought because I'm a slow person anyway, but I've been on the road constantly for work, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to get into this right now. But we got the floor pans trimmed up the way I want. Even these awful, horrible, awful excuses for rear floor pans. This is the most overpriced junk I've ever seen. I showed you guys who made these, I think, but I'm going to cover that again in the video about the car. But anyway, I've been learning about this welder. The welder was one of these things where, when you have to do something and you're kind of looking forward to getting it done, but you're apprehensive about it and you kind of sort of put it off. That's kind of why I was going with this thing, because I didn't know nothing about welders. I didn't know anything about hooking the gas up to the welder, any of that. So I was pretty intimidated by it, even for me. I'm not intimidated normally, but I got it all together and everything's working good. And I went to start doing some practice welding, and sorry about that, but you see I was just trying to do some tacks here, and you see how ugly they are and how much splatter there is on there and all over the table. It just, just wasn't going good. So I messed with this welder a little bit. I just started off on, did some reading beforehand and got some ideas about where to put the voltage and wire speed and things like that, and the gas flow and stuff. So I was in the ballpark. I feel like I was in the ballpark. But I was just getting these nasty welds. So, I don't know what was going on, man. So I fooled with it a little bit. I just go up with settings, down with settings a little bit, and I just could not get it to straighten up. So I thought, man, even though I'm a greenhorn at this, I know I'm not this bad at this because I just couldn't get it to puddle. You know, I couldn't actually get it to make a good puddle and, you know, have good flow or anything. It's just these nasty, dirty welds like that. So I started looking around. I slunked back into the house and did some more reading, and I was trying to get an idea about what might be going on here. So I read something, and it made a whole lot of sense. So I came out here and checked, and sure enough, I figured out what the problem was. And I should have already known the problem. I made a very rookie mistake. You figured it out yet? Take a look at this wire. You get it? You know what's going on? You know what I did? I know what I did. I sure do. All right, well, this thing is you can either use it for flux or you can use it for gas welding with solid wire. All right, well, when I got this thing set up, I had to change the polarity on it, and I had to change the roller down here because luckily this one's the one that has a roller that will take 3 different types of wire. You either have like 23 or 24 thousandths, the little thin stuff, the solid wire, you have the 30 thousandth solid wire, or you have the, I think they call it VK, as the group says, it's serrated stuff for, it's the one there at the back, I think, if you can see down in there, but that's the one for flux wire. So I went and looked at this wire number. This is the complimentary spool wire they give you. So I ran that number in there, went in there and looked at it on the computer, and sure the hell enough, this is flux core wire. So I was trying to use the wrong wire on the wrong groove. All this is wrong, and I should have known that because when the whole rest of the thing was already set up for flux wire, flux welding, flux core welding, why in the world that I didn't think to look at the wire spool right there is beyond me, but that was an entirely rookie mistake. So I had to go out this evening in the rain for something else. So I ran on down to Tractor Supply. They sell Hobart products, and got the right wire. So we're going to try this again tomorrow. I cannot believe I did that, but I did it. I did it. You see what those marks are? That's where it's been getting condensation in here, and it's been dripping a little bit of sweat on the roof of the car, I think. Anyway, well, we're going to get going on this thing again and continue. When you get past the New Year's, man, I'm going to have a whole lot less to do, hopefully, outside of my fun stuff. So, poor old car. But anyway, I'm in the middle of this. I have to finish it, so we're going to do it. All right, guys. Well, thank you for watching, and hopefully this will give you some enlightenment about these alternators. You know, I know most people, I guess, don't really care. In the end, they're just going to throw one on it. But, you know, if you got a car you want to keep original or put back original as possible, you know, this is one way to do it, help do it. And the thing about it is, you know, you can't experience how things were originally if they're not original. You know, I know it's a profound statement, but so, you know, people, I'll just say it real quick, you know, guys always subscribe to the bigger is better philosophy in every part of their lives, and alternators are no exception. You know, people think, well, even though this car I have, this old Mopar I have like this one, doesn't have a stereo in it, doesn't have an electric fan, doesn't have air conditioning, doesn't have anything, that the 37 amp alternator has to be insufficient. It just has to be. 46 amp may be a little bit better, but what we really need is a 90 amp alternator on this car. We just do, because that's bigger, so it's better. No. And you know, one other thing too is I see people on the internet, they sell these alternators that are remanufactured Mopar alternators, and they say that they are 90 amp alternators. They're in a case like this, just like this one, maybe a square back. And they say they're a 90 amp alternator, and I say that's BS because they never made one in a case like this that I'm aware of that was more than 60 amps. So how you manage to remanufacture one and get it up to 90 amps is beyond me. And plus, the fact of the matter is that if you got a car like this one or that one out there, that dark, that has all the original wiring in it, then you have no business putting a 90 amp or 100 amp alternator on one of these cars anyway, unless you do a whole lot of rewiring. Well, let me take that back. Not a whole lot, but you do some rewiring to take the charging circuit out of the inside of the car. There's ways to do that that are outlined on the internet, so you just have to do it. Anyway, guys, we are going to wrap it up here. So I thank you for watching, and I'm sorry I didn't get this video up earlier, but just the way it is sometimes. You just got to be out doing what you got to do for a while, and then we'll get back in and have some more fun. Coming up. See ya.